and welcome to our podcast. My name's Melanie Stevens. I'm a spiritual teacher from Devon in the UK, and with me I have Kat Bazilko.
Hello, I'm Kat and I deal with soul level healing. So I work with angels, help you become soul aligned, and also I have a lot of self-discovery modalities, I suppose.
Awesome. Thank you, Kat. So today you might have heard us announce today's live session. We're going to be talking about the spiritual awakening. Now, we have covered the spiritual awakening a few weeks ago when we had a discussion. We were talking about it in more broad terms. So we were talking about what is the spiritual awakening? How do you know if you're going through it? And we did touch on a few key symptoms. However, the list of symptoms that you might experience through your spiritual awakening is pretty huge. And as you go through your spiritual awakening, you may notice more things happening, as I am still, and I'm sure Kat is still. It's not something that you go through that's really, really short and it's a couple of weeks and there you go, you're all through it. I mean, I'm 4 years into mine and I'm still discovering and learning and recognizing things and getting those epiphanies. So we thought we'd do a deep dive today and go into more detail about some of the symptoms and the things that you can experience in the spiritual awakening and bring in some of our own real life examples as well. So I think I don't want to go back through all the stuff we've already talked about, but just very briefly, when people say, what is a spiritual awakening? It's a period of time in your life where everything starts to change. It can be sparked by a traumatic event. It can be sparked by the loss of a loved one. It can be sparked by losing your job, losing your home, something quite unpleasant and traumatic. It can be sparked by nice things. It can be sparked by the birth of a baby. It's when you kind of switch off your autopilot, I think is probably a good way to describe it. So we go through our lives and we get taught things and we get programmed and we learn how to behave and how to be accepted in society. We learn rules, we learn laws. We get a job, we work, we earn money, we have weekends off. Everything's kind of, we just fall into it without choosing it. And then when something happens to trigger the awakening, we suddenly question purpose. Why are we doing this? Why am I here? Why am I just on autopilot running through life doing what everybody else is doing? That is the spark of the spiritual awakening. And then things start to happen. You notice signs and things happening in your life. You'll notice patterns of things coming up where it's almost like deja vu, where you're met with the same sort of situation over and over again, which is so that you can heal from it, but you don't know that at the time. So it's the spiritual awakening is a period of time when you start to go through all of these different things. So I've got a bit of a list to work through. I've made a few notes on some of the more common symptoms that you might experience. And Kat and I are going to discuss them and bring in our own real life experiences around all these different things. Now, I don't want to sort of categorize them and say some are good and some are bad, because they just are. They're just part of the awakening. But some of them may feel more pleasant and some of them less so. But they're all for a purpose. They're all for a greater purpose. So to start off, when you start to go through a spiritual awakening, you may notice that you become more sensitive and empathic. So what does that look like? What does it mean when you say more sensitive? Again, it's that autopilot, isn't it? When you go through life on autopilot, you're not really feeling much. You're just reacting to things that happen in life. When you become more sensitive, you become aware of your own energy. You become aware of other people's energy. You become sensitive to noise. You become sensitive to surroundings. And it may be that you start being a bit more choosy with who you spend your time with, what you spend your time doing, because you might suddenly realize that perhaps you're not so comfortable in huge crowds of people anymore. Perhaps you're not that comfortable with loud noises anymore. You're becoming really, your senses are becoming really heightened. And with the empathy as well, you feel more. I think that's the way of describing empathic. You feel more when somebody's hurt, it hurts you, and you become more aware of that.
Just on that,
notice,
sorry,
Kat?
Pardon? Sorry.
Is that something you've noticed? I mean, we're both sensitive anyway, but have your sensitivity become heightened throughout your awakening?
Yes. And I just wanted to add on to that sensitivity, growing sensitivity, and how that spiritual awakening can start. You mentioned, us starting to question things. But also one thing that came to my mind is the fact that now I feel even more people will be becoming spiritually awakened due to the situations that are happening in external life, in the world, because there's a lot of darkness that is coming out to light, and it's very, very triggering. So, and that will be triggering to our sensitivity as well, which might have been maybe put dormant or just not really looked at, because there are many patterns, subconscious patterns that we have, that just, let's say, help us deal with the bad stuff in the world, which often looks like us repressing a lot of things, or not paying attention, or just, living in denial of some sort. And then whether there's some sort of a situation or crisis that happens it can happen in your personal life. But now I feel maybe that's why you've been called to talk about it again, because a lot of it is actually coming out to public view.
Yeah.
And majority of people in the world are kind and loving. So all of this darkness that's being so visible now will be triggering our sensitivity, our empathy, and we, in effect, we might feel a lot more sensitive to, as you said, crowds, or just being in company of other people, and it might become a lot more visceral, a lot, like you feel it a lot more. It might show up as a onset of maybe depression, maybe anxiety. Even if you've dealt with it before, perhaps now it's culminating and you feel just too overwhelmed, and you notice these signs of being a lot more sensitive to others' company. And so, yes, so kind of roundabout way to add and answer your question, I have felt more sensitive. However, I feel like it was more of an awareness that I always have been, if that makes sense also. So before, I would experience anxiety, which I didn't know, I didn't have a word for it. But only once I understood it and I was on the other side and started to pay attention to how I feel around others, and I understood why now I might feel certain way, I then recognized it as a sensitivity to others' energies, rather than, like, I don't know, anxiety of any sort.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I've always been sensitive, and I recognize that more now as an adult. And I just thought I just was scared of everything. I was timid. I was anxious, but actually I was just overwhelmed by the energy of the world, and bad things that happened. I couldn't deal with it. And yeah, there's a lot being brought to the surface at the moment in all areas of everybody's lives. A lot of truths coming out. People are realizing the unfairness in the world, and really feeling it and being aware of it. And it's being brought to the surface in our external life, like you were saying, but it's being brought to the surface in our physiology, because that anxiety of, I really don't feel very comfortable in this world, is coming up as we're recognizing what's causing that, so that we can do something about it. So it can be quite uncomfortable. And I do feel like that's why this month I have a theme every month. I know you do the same with your newsletter and your website, and this month, very strong calling to revisit the spiritual awakening. So my guides are obviously pushing me to bring this up, because it's very prevalent for people at the moment.
And my angel theme was spiritual growth.
There you go.
Wasn't it? So I just thought, when I was doing my short video on my Facebook group, I just thought, wow, how serendipitous, not coincidental, because there are no coincidences.
No coincidences.
How serendipitous that we are merging that topic within the same month, because I felt like that is really, you know, on trend, let's say, just because it is what's happening, and there probably will be more. It will be obviously happening throughout time. It's not like it's 1 day, 2 day, or 1 month. But because of all the astrological shifts, very big ones during this summer, I feel like a lot more people will be really jumping on this awakening train. Whether they like it or not, it's just gonna happen. Yeah.
Absolutely, and it actually brings me on to the second point here, is when your intuition is feeling stronger as well. Now, again, Kat and I are always working on our intuition. It's part of what we do, but people who wouldn't normally perhaps consider themselves very intuitive, when they start to go through a spiritual awakening, recognize they are intuitive, maybe they didn't realize they were, and B, it will start to get stronger even without you putting any effort into developing it. You'll notice with the awakening the changes energetically that are happening within you and in the world. That intuition will really start to sharpen, and you will know things without knowing how you know them, and you'll feel, oh, I'm not very comfortable about that, so I'm not going to go and do that. And that's your intuition talking to you rather than your logical mind. And you'll start to shift into naturally connecting into your intuition more the more you go through the awakening, which is a wonderful thing. Intuition is such a blessing. And as I was talking about becoming more sensitive and empathic, and our senses being heightened, our intuition is one of our senses. It's known as the sixth sense. That is also heightened. So everything is heightened, and you'll become really, you'll hear things that you never noticed before, sounds in the garden. You'll hear people's conversations. You'll be like, wow, it's like my hearing has got supersonic. All of your senses will be sharpened. And that will only continue to get sharper and sharper.
And that also includes sort of being able to feel and recognize falsehoods when someone is maybe saying, but they mean something else. Maybe before you didn't have that, let's call it ability, or weren't open to it. And then also which is kind of the same thing, reading between the lines. I feel like those will be the things also that will mean that basically your intuition is now louder. That's how it appears as well.
And it is loud, because like if you had an internal bullshit alarm, be prepared for that to be on superpower, because it will be. You will just know, and you'll be really reactive to people lying to you, because you'll feel it in your body, like, no, this person's not being honest. And you'll see dishonesty everywhere. You have to turn the telly on or go on the internet. You'll see dishonesty, but you'll feel it and react to it. And that gets very, very strong again, which is wonderful. I think that's brilliant. With all of this heightened senses and reacting to things that perhaps you would have been on autopilot for before and not noticed, you might find that you're feeling very, very drawn to spend time in nature. I've always loved nature, but I just for me, a walk was exercise and fresh air. It was more about the logical, well, I need to walk, I need to move my body, and I need to get fresh air. Whereas now, it keeps me sane to be in nature. I've got really into gardening, and I love trees. I feel drawn to trees. I feel safe around the forest and anything, nature, birds, wildlife, animals, I feel even more drawn to. And that's because of this heightened sensitivity. We heal by spending time in nature. So if you feel more drawn to, maybe it's the forest, maybe it's the beach, maybe it's the park, whatever it is, or even just your garden, that's because you're needing the healing energy of nature to just calm you down and ground you, and bring about that sense that everything's going to be okay in the midst of all the chaos that's happening in the world.
Yes, it's certainly very healing. It becomes a lot more healing, and you become more balanced, grounded, calm when you're around in nature. I've noticed that although I never also was anti-nature in any sense, but I just didn't, think about it much, I guess. Over time now, after my spiritual awakening, once I have expanded my consciousness as to what nature is, and I actually started again being more sensitive, feeling nature more, and its healing properties, it's even if you're not living anywhere near nature right now, I'm pretty sure there are some parks or spaces where birds are, because birds are everywhere. And I've noticed, especially in the mornings when I hear bird songs, it just feels like they're singing in my heart. It's just listening to it is a completely different experience to what
Yeah.
it was before.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even noticed it before.
Mm.
Now it is joyous, and it just it instantly calms me down and makes me,
Hmm.
I can feel it like raising my whole
Yeah.
energy, raising my vibration, and just tuning into nature is just it's wonderful, and we really do need it. Um, and another thing is, when you're going through a spiritual awakening, I don't think anybody enjoys negativity, but you will find you really, really want to avoid drama and negativity, whereas perhaps before it didn't really bother you. So if somebody's moaning about somebody, or there's some drama at work, whereas before you might have joined in with it, you might have turned a blind eye, you really feel like, oh no, it's like you can feel the vibration drop whenever somebody's complaining or there's some drama. And you just feel like, I need to remove myself from this. I can't even be in the vicinity. And you get completely put off by that sort of thing, because you're feeling that negativity a lot stronger. And again, that comes back to the heightened senses. And another thing is recognizing, this is quite a big thing, is recognizing oneness and becoming intolerant of the division and separation, the us versus them that we see in the media constantly, trying to cause this division between people who vote for that party and people who vote for that party, and the young versus the old, and different races versus each other, and the people that cause that division, where we're not separate from anyone or anything. And you don't need to understand that intellectually to feel that we're all one, that we're all part of the same. And when you see people behaving in different ways, they're just playing different roles. They're reflecting back different perspectives of what it is to be human, because we're all human, doing whatever we're doing in our lives. But instead of feeling like, oh, that type of person is different to me, I'm different to them, that starts to drop away. So that hatred, that the fear or the hatred of other people starts to just dissipate, because you realize there is no such other people. We're all together. We're not separate. You recognize the illusion of separateness, and you might not be able to understand where that comes from. It's a feeling that you just get from deep within, that everything is connected and is all part of the same whole.
Yeah, and that's a very big thing as well with when you recognize that we are one in that sense, and you break it down, you recognize that, as you said, we are being put in a ring against each other, really, by someone. It's always some sort of an authority, so-called authority, right? But then if you start breaking it down, you realize that we are all human, and we all have the very same basic needs: security, love, being not respected. I mean, respected also, but I mean deserving, feeling deserving
Yeah,
of
accepted.
something.
And
And really, every single conflict that is being perpetuated is the powers that be are playing on those strings. There's always a reason behind something that ends up being violent, as a way of either reclaiming security of some sort. Probably mostly that's it, I think, because when we don't feel safe, then, and we're scared, we live in fear, and someone tells us this is what we need to do to reclaim this feeling of safety, and that word safe is used over and over and over again. If you probably notice, if you haven't yet, you'll notice it now for sure, as if everything that is being done in the world on a large scale violently is an abuse of the word safe. It's as if you go and do that, whether it's war or something else, it's to make you feel safe. That really rings, that really gets people going, because it plays on our insecurities and our fears. So it's really important to notice that. And I feel like, again, because we're talking about it, more people will. But then, if anything, that's just manipulation. It's emotional manipulation, psychological manipulation. So once we all have our BS radars, a lot stronger, we will feel it very strongly in our body as falsehood of some sort, and just, lie, basically pure lies. Because if you were to meet that person, let's say example of war. I mean, war obviously is happening these days, but it never kind of ceased to happen. It's always been happening somewhere in the world. And probably if two opposing parties at some point, like the soldiers, I mean, not the authorities, sat together and actually talked about it, it would all be broken down to, I just want to be safe. I want my family to be secure. I don't want to live in fear, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, well, that's also what I want, right? And we are just fighting against each other just because someone said this and this.
Yeah, exactly. So another, and these are all, you can see how they're all interconnected, all of these things. So another symptom is when you start to recognize that all of life is sacred. So this is like, and I love this, years ago, if I saw a bug on me, I'd just flick it off, or I'd put it outside. I would never kill it, because I've never been like that. But, you just sort of flick things off you, and, people might swat flies, or, put pesticides down. When you start to become very, very sensitive to life and everything, and you recognize how we're all connected, you start to become a bit more respectful of that. So if I get a tiny little bug on me, I'll very, very gently now put it on my finger, take it outside and put it on one of my plants or something. And before I would have just blown it off me. I wouldn't have even thought about what it was going to do. I can't even kill a fly. I don't care what it is. I cannot kill anything because it affects me. That's a life. It's got energy running through it, and it has every right to be here. And my garden's full of slugs and snails that eat my plant leaves, but I'm not gonna kill them because of that, because they're doing what they do. They're alive, So you start to really respect the fact of life and energy being in everything, and you don't take things for granted. You don't sort of, you kind of look after everything around you, and treat everything like it's special and to be respected. And again, that's that change in how we used to perceive things as an annoyance or a bug or something that's irritating. And then you're like, no, it's a life. I must respect this life. And if that means walking out into the garden with this tiny, tiny insect on my hand, then that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I would also add to that, because I've seen the change in me, is the fear might dissipate as well. If you had any phobias, especially like spider phobias, I think that's quite a common one. I used to be petrified, terrified of spiders, to the point that if I knew there was one in the house, even if it was a different room, I couldn't sleep in my bedroom knowing it's there in that room. And I did have nightmares. I used to have nightmares, dreams of spiders as well. And once I started going through the spiritual awakening, the fear has subsided. Now, I'm not going to say that if I saw a big spider, like I wouldn't flinch. But,
Careful what you wish for, Kat.
Yeah. But I really am so much calmer, and it doesn't bother me if I see one. Before, for instance, even little tiny spiders I would be afraid of. to even, try and move them around. Let's say I was trying to move them out of the house. Now I don't. I'm just not afraid at all. It doesn't stick with me and doesn't create this anxiety and fear, just knowing that it's there, because I understand. I just look at it differently. It's a creation. It has a purpose, and I just leave it alone. I mean, like I say, I would still maybe take it out or whatever, but I'm not in the state of fear of like, who knows what's going to happen. And it's with nature in general, like you say, you would leave the slugs because they do their thing. They're there for a reason. Every single insect, animal, plant has a purpose. They all coexist in order to continue the balance within nature. And the great example of seeing how trying to control nature is really playing against us, because humans tried to just grab nature and just control it and make it their own. And now, of course, we have all of these movements and activists trying to say, hang on a second, you're killing us here. We're dying because we have completely created an imbalance in the whole ecosystem. You basically can't dominate over nature, because we all are part of it. And if we just left it alone, it will take care of us. We might not realize, but that's what it does. It's taking care of us. Things happen for a reason. Nature regulates itself, and trying to control it is really not bringing great results.
Well, no, exactly. Look how that's gone for us. So
yeah, exactly.
we learn from that. But it's interesting you say about the spiders, because I used to be terrified of spiders. I would never kill one. I've always been really against. I'm not going to have anything killed because of my stupid.
Me neither. I always had to ask someone else to take it out for me, because
exactly. But just pop it gently. I'll always be like, don't throw it. Just pop it gently. Be careful with it. But now I kind of just just leave them. I share my house with loads of spiders, and I see them all the time. And I was hoovering the other day and I saw one run away from me, and I was like, it's gone where I need to hoover. So I just didn't hoover. I just stopped put it away, because I'm not picking it up the hoover. That's evil. And I just thought, no, I don't want to frighten it off. It's doing its thing. I'll hoover that bit later. It's fine. I see them all the time, and I don't even bother putting them out now. I still don't want them on me, and I would still probably freak, but it doesn't affect me in the same way, because I recognize it as a life. It's not something for me to be afraid of. It's just a life doing its thing. So
that's really funny,
isn't it? Just drops away, and you're like, oh, okay, there's a spider in my bathroom. Hi, spider. And then you just carry on.
That's exactly what happened to me also. I think it was a year ago. We got a spider in the bathroom, and because it was quite close, he wasn't too far away. He was quite close. And in the past, I would have been, oh, please, can you take him out? Because I can't. But this time I didn't also want to take him out. I was like, I'm just going to leave him. It was almost like a test for myself, to just see if I can just be calm in myself, knowing that he's right there. So if you go and, wash your face and he's like, and I'm not looking at him. In the past, I would be, if I can't see him, then I'm really fearful, because I don't know if he's like crawling on me right now. But I was able to just completely shut it down, just do my thing. He's been with us for like, if not a year, I don't know, like 6 months. One day I was cleaning in the bathroom, and I destroyed his spider web a little bit. I kind of had to. And then, but he hid away. And then afterwards, I could see him come out and do the same spider web what he just did. And I actually just looked at it curiously, like, oh, look at you being so productive and all that, and just left it. And that is, like, it might sound ridiculous, but that is a big thing for me.
Yeah,
because
same here.
I wouldn't be able to do that at all before.
No, I've been terrified of them since I was a child. Absolutely terrified. Nightmares about them. And it is funny, because I do feel guilty when I take their webs down when I'm cleaning, but then I have to remind myself they will just build another one.
Yeah,
they'll be
it's okay. Yeah.
And but it's funny, isn't it, how things change? And that, again, that's a really positive side of the awakening, because you stop living in your fears.
Constant fear.
And of course, when you're frightened of something, you see it more often. when the fear drops away, you don't really
That is
see
so
or
true.
notice
That's the
them
thing. I
anywhere.
also, yeah, you don't see. And I was just thinking that the other day, like, where are all these spiders that I always saw around? And now I don't know where they are.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And another symptom of the awakening is when we recognize how we see and experience life. So this is very much about the human labels that we put on things like spiders and other things. We say this is good and this is bad. Part of the awakening is when you recognize nothing is good or bad. Nothing is, everything just is. So our opinion of things shapes our experience of them and our version of reality. And when we say that's bad and that's bad and that's bad, oh, the world's a really dangerous, scary place, you will be presented with a scary world because that's what you are creating yourself. When you say, oh, that's good and that's good and that's good, oh, the world is actually quite a good, safe place. That's how you experience it because you're creating it yourself. The world isn't good and it isn't bad. It's not, it's neither. It just is, but our reality is shaped by us. And if we drop the human labels on stuff, we recognize that nothing's good or bad. And then we kind of can take the pleasure in everything, which is a strange concept to most people. You think if you feel tired or if your back hurts or, you break something, oh, that's bad. And then you recognize it's not bad. And if I drop my vibration and get into a strop and get really angry about the fact that I've just broken something, all that does is create something unpleasant because I've created it. If I just accept it, move on and stop labeling it, life feels more peaceful. It just kind of flows because we're not, that's good and that's bad and we're going like that, because we're not going like that. We're just flowing with life.
Yeah, and if anything, if there's something that you recognize, that maybe maybe it's more about you, something that you just don't agree with anymore. It's not good, it's not bad, but I don't agree with it. I don't want it in my experience. And if anything, that's just a springboard for you to make the change, right? So then you're moving towards something that you want to experience in your life, but without that judgment of, oh, I'm better, they are worse. Um, in doing this, it's almost like it's going back to our conversation with the universal laws of universe, with that law of polarity. There will always be polarity in life. You have
Mhm.
to have light to have darkness, or you have to have darkness to have light. There's always going to be up and down, left and right, and all of these things. And more than anything, they're just triggering you, or giving you a reason to then make a choice or change towards what you feel is more of love, hopefully, if that's your choice, of course. Free
Yeah,
will, right? But
yeah, yeah,
yeah, but it doesn't mean it's good or bad.
no, and we
Let's
just
say.
outgrow things. We just outgrow
Yeah.
things. There are things that I used to really enjoy years ago that I don't enjoy now, but that's not because they're bad or they're low vibration. I've just got different. I just want different things now. But when you drop the labels, otherwise I'll look at my past like, oh, I was a bad person because I used to eat really bad food and I used to drink loads, and I wasn't a bad person. That was what I wanted to experience back then. And now I don't want to experience that. So I've just changed.
And that's a really good example, because that's what, if anyone was ever looking into nutrition or eating habits, I mean, there's so much stuff going on, obviously, online and just in the world in general. But when you find those coaches, wellness coaches or nutrition coaches, that really want to work with you on the relationship and psychology of food, they will start telling you there's no good or bad when it comes to food. We have to drop the labels and
Yeah.
make it neutral. There's never good or bad. You were told probably that something's good or something's bad for you, but it isn't. You just start looking at things completely differently, and you have to change your mindset about them. Which, by the way, I also a little bit mention on my Reclaim Your Wellbeing program. That's one of the things that I mentioned about nutrition. Just need to drop the labels, stop judging, stop just starting to stop judging yourself first, or at the same time, and it will help you to start not judging others or other things or foods or whatever it is, lifestyles, etc.
Yeah. I try and when I'm eating, just listen to what my body wants. So my body will tell me if I haven't had enough salt. My body will tell me if I crave something sweet. Oh, I'm needing sugar. I'm needing something. I might need fruit. I know, my body will tell me what to eat when I listen to it, and I don't listen to my mouth, which is always greedy.
Yeah.
And then you know what makes you feel good. You know what satisfies whatever it is that you're craving at the time. If you try and avoid all the stuff your body's telling you want, then your body's going to get upset because it needs something. So another symptom of the spiritual awakening is more present moment awareness. And this is something I really notice the present moment when I'm in nature. Everything drops, all my thoughts drop. I don't need to worry about what I'm going to do today because I just want to appreciate where I'm at right now when I'm out in nature because I love it. And I get into that space of present moment awareness more often now than I used to prior to my awakening. It's like I slip into that naturally and I just stop thinking about things. And again, we've had programming that you've got to plan your day, you've got to go to work, you've got to have a schedule, you've got to have things in your diary, and it's exhausting living like that. I'm not saying don't live like that. We all have things that we need to do, and we have, kids to feed, dogs to feed. You've got to pick the kids up from school. You can't be so in the present moment that you suddenly just don't do anything. But when we're constantly thinking, it takes us away from the present moment. And if you can capture those moments in the day when you can just enjoy what you're doing, even if you're working, even if you're cleaning the car, washing up, doesn't matter. And I find that the more I go through the awakening, I slip into that complete presence and that quietening of the mind a lot more easier than I used to. Plus, I do practice meditation a lot more. I'm drawn to sit quietly. I'm drawn to silence a lot more than I used to be because I want the silence. And actually, it's never silent. Like we said, you can hear the birds, you can hear the wind in the trees. But I can't hear that if I'm incessantly talking to myself. So by stopping that and just sitting with what is, it's really quite blissful. And that is more heightened as well throughout the awakening.
Yeah, I definitely experienced that a lot also previously, where it was I always had, again, I was experiencing anxiety based on where I want to be in life. So I was always forward thinking,
Yeah.
and it was, in a sense, really bringing poison to my present moment because I could never enjoy the present moment because I was always in my mind of, I'm still not there yet, wherever that is. So that was definitely a very big shift for me, and the practice of just being present, which kind of came in the companionship of just trusting that everything's okay and spirit has my back, because I had to, kind of get into that space as well to be able to be present. But then it made just so much difference because I realized that when I am present, so for instance, like you said, you could be doing something, you're maybe cleaning the house, and it just means that you're focused on cleaning the house. You're just thinking about, I don't know, next cupboard you're going to clean. You're not thinking about, your future or your past either, of what happened and where you're going. You're just focused on that job. And then the amazing thing happens is that you actually gain clarity. So if you will always evolve in life. That's pretty much the purpose of our soul being in this human experience and us living here. We evolve all the time. So wherever it is that you're meant to be going, you will be going there by being present, and you will have more clarity by being present. You will, whether it's because you maybe become inspired, maybe you'll have some sort of an idea to do something, or whatever it is that you know you want to do will come a lot easier because you'll be calmer, and you will only focus on just that one thing at that one time. So
It's
yeah.
that it's that getting out of saying I'll be happy when
Yeah.
I've got more money. I'll be happy when I'm more successful. I'll be happy once my business is taken off. Why not be happy now? And then, as we talked about the universal laws, if you raise your vibration and sit with gratitude of what you've already got, more good stuff comes to you anyway. But if we're always feeling depleted because we're here and we want to be there, the universe will just give you more. It will just keep moving the goalpost. You'll just keep feeling that sense of lack because you are projecting out that sense of lack, and that's what will come into your experience. So yeah, inner peace, being peaceful and accepting of what is, because everything's for a reason and everything's in perfect timing. I feel like I've become a lot more patient. That was a big lesson for me in my awakening, and I was sent many tests to strengthen my patience. Thank you, universe. No hint of sarcasm at all. But I was sent many tests, and I have become more patient because I know now everything happens when it's meant to, and you can't supercharge everything. Sometimes we just need to accept that where I am now is exactly where I need to be. I recognize that when I look back in my life, everything I did happened for a reason, and everything's moved at the right pace. But we forget that sometimes when we're like, oh, but I want to be there. And it's like, you will get there in the right time, just like your whole life has happened in the right time. It hasn't happened too quickly or too slowly. It's been perfect, just as it's meant to.
Definitely had that big lesson as well myself.
Yes.
Being very impatient before. Yes.
Yeah. I think all of us will probably have to experience that. It's a very common human trait. And there's no judgment here. And I can still get impatient sometimes, but
again,
better.
Yeah, and again, it's not just a necessarily personality trait, although there will be people who just have it as their personality trait, but also there's another thing that we are taught. You need to go and get it. If you want this, go and get it. You got to do this. If you want to be better in your business, you have to do this, and that, and then it just becomes so overwhelming and so like consuming that you're not thinking about anything else, definitely not living in the present moment.
Yeah, exactly. Another interesting symptom is more authenticity and honesty and truthfulness. Now, that's not to say that before you go through a spiritual awakening that you lie, but when you people please, and when you are so tactful that you kind of don't end up speaking your truth because you're so scared of hurting people's feelings and all of this human stuff that we have going on, that kind of drops away. That's been interesting because sometimes the truth will just come flying out my mouth and I think, ooh, I haven't sort of put lots of sorry around that, or please, or I haven't put all the human stuff around that. I've just said it as it is. That's an interesting symptom. Quite like it, actually. And I can't help it now, but just be really just truthful. I don't have the energy to be apologetic for being honest about how I feel.
For just being yourself and just sharing yourself authentically. Yes, 100%. I was definitely the same. I would very much anticipate other people's needs, and that's without necessarily conscious awareness. I've talked about it quite a bit in one of the other episodes, and I had no idea how much I've lost myself until I started going through a spiritual awakening, when one of the messages or prevailing patterns or kind of information that was coming to me was all about being authentic. And it's almost like I didn't even know what that is. I had to ask myself many times, what do I want, or what do I think, or what is my body intuition telling me? And I also was very much, I didn't realize it until now that I see it, how many breaks my mind and my body created up until then before I said something ever. It was so automatic. Again, it wasn't a conscious thought, oh, I'm not going to say this, I'm not going to say that. It just happened in my body. If as a response, let's say, to something that someone's saying, and I would feel the response or the thoughts, but my body would be like, nope, breaks, not happening. And I just didn't. And it was just so ingrained in me. I didn't realize until, again, I opened up, and then same as you, now it just comes out, and I'm so not worried or bothered how that is being received, because that's also not my problem, because I also understand now that people will receive you based on where they are
Yeah.
anyway. So you can't, I would, in the past, I would try and make sure I say it right with the right words exactly so I'm understood, and the person understands me completely, my intention and everything behind what I'm saying. But now I'm like, I don't, because I just know that it will be received depending on where that person is. Um,
Yeah.
and that goes also with emotions. My one thing that has changed is I was very much suppressing my emotions before. Now they just fly out,
Yeah.
especially with crying. That's the big thing with me. I have, for those who are interested in astrology, I have my Mars, which is the fighter kind of archetype in Cancer. A Cancer is nothing to do with fighting, so it's a very watery sign. So someone brought someone gave an example of Mars being in Cancer. It's sort of like you send a soldier, a fighter, to a nursery, and then he's like there, and it's like, what am I supposed to do? Little kids here, and like I can't, like, it's just I can't. I process my anger through my emotionality of crying. And in the past, I was very embarrassed, maybe not embarrassed, but I didn't understand it.
Mm.
And I thought I'm just maybe a crybaby or something like that. But I just know that I naturally process anger in that way. It comes out of me through water, my water Cancer sign. Whether I'm sad, upset, or angry, it will at some point come out as a cry. So
Yeah.
these days, it just happens, and I'm not embarrassed, and I don't care. I just let it out because it brings relief. And it's very authentic to me. And I honestly don't care how that's received
No,
that much.
there's a couple of really important things there. I think the one thing about sort of losing the people pleasing, but also, sometimes years ago, if I thought I'd said something and I hadn't articulated myself well, probably through fear of offending somebody, so I limited what I wanted to say with words to soften the blow. And then, and you think, oh, I think that person might not have took that the right way, or they haven't understood me. Nowadays, I think, oh, well, and I don't bother trying to explain myself to them, because I just think they'll have taken it the way they've taken it. It's not up to me to then go and explain it again to make sure they've understood what I meant. It's no, they've took it the way they need to take it. And I just trust that if they took it badly, there's a reason for that. Not
Yeah.
an issue. So it's interesting to just be like completely blasé about that kind of thing, and not go and try and make yourself understood, because it's just too much effort. If
Yeah.
I've not been understood, I've not been understood. We've got different perspectives. If that's how it's been received, then that's fine.
Yeah, that's it's a really, and it's a very strong thing in people in general. I think I have observed, it was definitely in myself, not so much now, but I can see it a lot, especially I think when you see a situation where someone would behave a certain way or say something, and then you receive it as very neutral. It's just something someone said, they expressed it. Whereas the other person, let's say you were in company with, they took it very personally. There's still this kind of personal, whatever people do and say, oh, I'm taking it personal.
Mm.
They have, but that, again, that just tells you that whether it's you experiencing it still or person you're in company with, that's just their kind of thing. But I just noticed this big difference where I'm able to receive someone's message or communication in a completely neutral way, even if it's not very nice what they're saying, but I know that's just them thinking that way. That's what they're going through. They're experiencing the situation. It says nothing of me. It's
Exactly.
maybe their perspective of me, but I know me. And however, no pushing in that moment will change anything. If anything, it will make it worse. Whereas someone else might maybe get into an argument or to take it so personally that they start defending themselves or retaliating, or and then arguments arise and things like that.
Yeah, and all of this comes from ego, and part of the awakening is the recognition of when ego has kicked in, and being able to step back from that and observe it. So we recognize the ego it's a part of us, but it's not who we are. Nothing is ever personal, ever. If somebody doesn't like me, that's on them. If somebody is offended by something I've said, that's on them. If somebody feels upset because of who I am, that's on them. I haven't upset them. And this is another thing. Nobody ever makes me angry. Nobody makes me cry. I cry in reaction to something somebody else has said or done because of something within me that I needed to be aware of. It's never about the other person. And it's the same when that's, somebody said, you've upset me. I haven't done anything. That's on you. That's something within you. It's a trigger. Maybe it's shadow work that's needed. Same with me. It's taking responsibility for how we're feeling and not projecting it onto other people, because all that does is bring the ego up. And then we get defensive and we blame, and that's your fault. You've done that to me. And we can see that a lot clearer once we start going through the awakening of what it is, and just step away from the drama and disconnect from it, really.
Yeah, and that's just one thing that I thought I'll mention, because it's quite important and it's prevalent in relationships where we try and change the other person or something, and also what we're saying is not to say that you should be, or you must be, or you will be now tolerant of everyone's behavior. That's, even if it's nasty or whatever, that's totally not the point. The point is that if you again notice something that you're not in agreement with, it doesn't vibe with you, right? Very new age description, then you can remove yourself from it. Like, say, remove yourself from the drama. If you're constantly within situations that are drama driven, whether it's relationships or just relationships like friend, in the sense of friendships as well, then probably there's something in you that's looking for it and it's creating it constantly. So you can't be angry at these other people that they keep dragging you into drama, for example. It's like it's there because it's within you, so you're a part of it. But when you are aware, then you can start deciding whether you want to continue or not.
That's it. It's recognizing that, everything happens for us and not to us, in order for us to evolve and grow. And, if you're in a relationship with somebody and you say, this person doesn't love me enough, that's because you don't love you enough. They're reflecting back what's in you. And if you have no self-love, you will see that in the other person reflecting back what's lacking within you. When you have self-love, you don't need it from anyone else because it's there within you anyway. And again, it comes back to looking at what's happening within us is reflected on the outside, and then it stops that blame and judgment of circumstances and people, because we realize that it's being brought to us in order to help us to awaken and evolve. And that's the whole point of us being here. And when you mention crying easily, that's actually the next one on my list. This is another symptom to be aware of.
Wasn't it? Sorry, yeah.
Oh yes, crying at the drop of a hat. And it's you have stronger, faster, more fluctuating emotions. I can literally watch a sad story on the telly, and before they've even really got into the story, I'm floods of tears. And it's like, whoa, where's all this emotion come from? It pours out of me. And love as well. It's not just horrible things. So if I see something really cute, or if I see like someone's rescued an animal, the love I feel for the person and the animal and the situation and everything, and the whole world suddenly lights up and I feel wonderful. But that crying easily, emotions they're more fleeting, I would say, when you start to go through the awakening. You don't hang on to them. You feel them and then they dissipate, because you're not trying to hang on to them. You recognize they come and go, and you don't label them and hold on to them as long, but they are more intense. So they kind of do that a lot more, but they don't feel, you don't get stuck in the lows. You're just like, oh, okay, you kind of just move through it much easier.
And it's also like, in my experience, at least, when I started working with spirit and starting to feel spirit's love, and up until today, if I do meditation where my intention is to receive healing of some sort, I will cry, and I never know why, because there's nothing happening, but I just know it's because I'm clearing, you
Yeah.
know. And one, because I'm clearing, but also two, because the presence of love that spirit exudes, that I can feel, is of such high vibration that that's how my body reacts. So some people might be wondering why they are crying more on, maybe let's call them, in they might think they're silly things, but actually they're probably more sensitive to the beauty and love of spirit. I even had an experience once. It was during one of my more, let's call it, intense healing periods. But still, it wasn't a day that was in any way stressful. And I was just watching a program on TV, and I actually cried to a picture of a rose. And because I was so surprised by myself, but they actually took this shot. It was so beautiful. I just, like, spontaneously just cried a little, and I'm like, where did that come from? But it's this elevation, this love that you just feel and are able to experience, that just comes out, because
Mm.
not because you're upset, angry, whatever. It's just the high vibration of that feeling that creates this reaction, basically.
Yeah. No, I get it as well. I get it as well. Absolutely. And there'll be lots of people who are in the midst of an awakening who'll be like, oh my God, that's why I keep crying. It's not always sad tears, but it's just this
Mm,
wave of emotion that takes you over, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm
mm,
crying at that really beautiful scene that's just really made me, and you sort of put your hand to your heart because you can feel it
yeah.
in your heart chakra. So yeah, it's not, yeah, you cry at
Mm,
sad things with the empathy and the compassion, but you cry at beauty as well, very
mhm.
easily. A lot of crying. Um, Another thing that I've noticed, and we talk about going through these periods of healing, and I'm the same. If I go through periods of feeling really sad or anxious and I cry a lot, I just let it out and trust that on some deeper level I'm shifting out stuff, and my dreams might be more vivid, and I'll notice things. And at the time, it's not overly pleasant, but I've come to this stage in my awakening now where I kind of embrace it, because I know that I'm shifting old patterns and behaviors and thoughts, maybe from past lifetimes, shifting them out of my energy. And they will, a bit like a snow globe. When you shake a snow globe and all the snow comes up and you see it, and then it sort of falls back to the surface, it's like someone's shook you up, and all your
Mhm.
emotions and stuff from the past comes back up to the surface, and you're like, whoa, I'm having all these memories of these horrible situations that have like come up to the surface. They haven't come back, they haven't disappeared and come back again. They were still within you somewhere, and they needed to come up to be released. So you might dream about something unpleasant, you might feel a bit sad for a couple of days, or have a really good sob, and then you feel so much lighter because you've shifted out stuff that needed to come back up to the surface because it was still there, buried either in your shadow or in a memory, even a repressed memory, even something you forgot all about that comes back up, and you think, oh, that was horrible, why is that coming back? And old physical aches and pains and conditions, maybe a condition you haven't suffered from since you were a child, suddenly comes back, and you think, why has this come back? It's about trusting the process, that it's coming up to be released, and once it's released, it's gone. And
Mhm.
that's a nice feeling,
Yes,
because like, oh,
that's a
the weight.
very big thing. I
Mm,
think, especially when you said with memories, things coming back from the past, because I feel that many people would think that it's a bad thing, and now it's like they can't get rid of it, or as if it's haunting them. And because it might, of course, be overwhelming, depending obviously on the situation. And then, the response, if you were to go and see a doctor or something, they might give you antidepressants. But what do? They suppress it. So you're never truly healing, because you're trying to cut off that uncomfortable, painful feeling, thinking that if you don't, it's just going to be there forever. But in fact, it won't. It has to come out, because you have to process it. Otherwise, it just sits in your body, in your consciousness, subconscious somewhere, and it never goes away. It never goes away. So unless you just let yourself feel, Of course, do it mindfully, depending on what the situation is. If you need some help, please go and seek it. But most of all, as much as you can, try not to suppress it or make it, numb, making yourself numb to it. Yeah.
It's just about bringing it up to be released, and that can be quite painful and quite traumatic, but it's trusting that when it's happening as part of an awakening, it's being processed, allowed, acknowledged, and it will dissipate. If you get stuck in it, absolutely, I would never suggest to anybody like, well, don't get any help, get support. You can speak to doctors, you can speak to therapists. There's loads of people who can help you to shift those things. Loads of coaches these days who specialize in trauma and helping people work through it, not by numbing it or denying it, but work through it with different methods to help people cope. But ultimately, the end goal is to have allowed it to the point where it dissipates, and and you get to that acceptance that it happened and it's not happening anymore, and then you can sort of send it love and it's on its way, and you do feel better when you go through those periods. And I've had a few of those intense healing periods happen throughout my awakening. The first time I assumed that was it. Oh, well, I've been through that healing period, that's it, I'm healed. And it's like, no, you'll have a few more of those, and they do come and go. They don't happen constantly because you just wouldn't be able to cope with it. You'd just shut down. But they do come and go, but there's always a greater purpose for that, and I think that's really important to hold on to. There's always a greater purpose for it, and it's moving out. Another symptom, this is something that I still suffer with sometimes, so I have to make sure I do my ground cleanse protect ritual, is dizziness, lightheadedness, scattered thinking, head in the clouds, all those feelings where you don't feel like you're here. And it can be quite an unpleasant feeling, really, especially the dizziness and the lightheadedness. That just means you need to get grounded. When we're shifting and changing, going through a spiritual awakening, your energy body is changing, your vibration is changing, you're removing programming and limiting beliefs and heavy thoughts and judgments. You're removing all of that, and while that's happening, you're raising your vibration, which can leave you feeling a little bit dizzy, lightheaded, and it's because you're ungrounded. So the way to cope with this when it happens is to ground yourself in the earth by doing something physical, by getting out in nature, like we were talking about earlier. Take your shoes off, put your feet in the earth, put your feet on the ground. Imagine you've got roots coming out of the soles of your feet. This is a really good, if you can visualize. Imagine you've got tree roots coming out of the soles of your feet, and they plunge down into the earth below you, and they wrap around everything and pull you down. Just that visualization, just for a few minutes, or getting your feet in the earth, is enough to just bring you back into your body, and that dizziness and that lightheadedness will dissipate. But the first time it happens, you might feel like, oh, why do I feel like I'm going to faint? Because I've had it really bad a few times when I thought I feel like I'm actually going to collapse. And I just needed to ground.
Yes, grounding, very big thing for me as well. It was to learn, and so helpful. I personally found exercise helping with grounding. Any sort of exercise, if you like yoga, gym, running, walking, please don't be limiting yourself. Just whatever where you can move your body and you're really focused. That's why one of my I suppose maybe preferred ways of grounding through exercise would be something that really requires your focus. I think running is good, but you could really have your head in the clouds if you're running, because it's quite repetitive. Whereas if you do something like yoga or you work with weights, I used to work with weights, and I really enjoy it because you have to be so focused and concentrated on your body, how you stand, and then you just push through with your inner strength to push that weight or something. And it's so good. It's very, very grounded. You're definitely 100% in the moment, because you'll notice that if you try and do that whilst thinking of something else, you'll probably hurt yourself. You'll probably hurt yourself. So So if for any reason, you never thought of doing weights, maybe for that reason, try it, because personally, I think that it's really good. It's a
Mm.
really good grounding workout.
Yeah. And it's bringing yourself into the physical, isn't it? So anything to do with your body. So if it's
And
damp,
it's a metal
yeah, mm-hmm,
that you're holding.
yeah,
Mhm.
and you're feeling things, you're feeling what you're doing,
Mhm.
and bringing your attention into your senses. What can you feel? What, if even if you sat down doing something, you feel yourself in the seated position, you feel your
Mhm.
feet on the ground. You're bringing yourself back into a human body using your human senses, and that grounds you back into the earth, into the body, into the present moment. And you might find you need to do that regularly when you're going through a spiritual awakening. It might be something you need to build into your week, just taking that time to ground, because as your energy starts to fluctuate and change, that's something that you're going to need to really be aware of. We have got a few more left on the list, but I am aware of the time. Do you want to pick this up in another episode, or did you want to let me see how many there are left? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 left.
Okay. Yeah, we could pick it up. Or we could continue. I don't mind continuing. We can always create 2 parts from this as well.
Okay.
So I suppose it depends on your time availability.
I'm fine actually to carry on for a bit.
Okay.
I'm kind of in the
Yeah.
swing of things now, so
Yeah, I'm okay to continue today. So
awesome. Okay, let's because there's not that many left actually. We've covered most of them. This next one we've touched on what you're eating and things like that, but you may notice as part of the awakening you develop a new intolerance or sensitivity to something. It might be something like acidic food that no longer feels comfortable in your body. I can hardly drink any more alcohol. I just feel it burning. And I feel very uncomfortable and very sick, and it dehydrates me instantly. And I used to be able to drink quite a lot and never felt anything like that. But my body has become more sensitive to it, to the point where I don't really drink now at all. Spicy food. I used to love spicy food. I had it many times a week. And now I have to really limit what I have. Other people might develop wheat intolerance. You might develop lactose intolerance. You might find your skin gets really sensitive to washing powder, or you can't use perfume anymore. If you notice these things, as your energy changes and your vibration is rising, your physical body is going to undertake changes too. You might not be able to see them, but your body is getting lighter and vibrating at a slightly different frequency, which means certain things that you could tolerate before will suddenly not feel very comfortable. And it's like you feel the damage certain things are doing to your body. So don't be surprised if suddenly you go from being able to drink, smoke, eat certain foods, and you are less tolerant physically of those sorts of foods and those sorts of things. That's something that was a bit of a surprise to me.
yeah, the big thing that was really big for me as well. Especially because I come from a background of working in fitness. I was studying nutrition, and I had a lot of knowledge, mental energy. I just had knowledge, book knowledge, and whatever. And I was often, when I was following that, obviously I was also paying attention to how things make me feel, but I wouldn't say it was very balanced. I was still approaching it very much from intellectual point of view. And the big thing for me happened when I started my spiritual awakening was that I noticed once I have, I can call it, once I felt fulfilled spiritually, because I found spirit, I could feel divine love. I knew I had spirit guides. I could feel them. It felt like the love, divine love filled me up. And I very quickly got rid of or noticed the absence of the cravings that I used to have for
Mm,
sweet food.
mm,
And it was a very, very big thing for me because as much as I was conscious of what I'm eating, I never gave up chocolate, especially. So it was something that was of a craving that I could never manage or control. For instance, if I bought a block of chocolate, I knew that means I'm going to eat it within a few days. It's not like it would just sit there for weeks and I just have a little nibble here and there. It wasn't happening in my world. So I was conscious of it. So maybe I would control myself or limit myself, but I knew what was happening because the craving was there. Whereas when I went through the spiritual awakening and I felt filled and fulfilled internally, it just went away. I obviously still buy it. I'm not gonna, it's nice, enjoyable, but I just don't have this craving for it anymore. And also I have started paying attention to how my body feels after certain foods even more than before, rather than approaching it intellectually. Again, kind of circling back to what's good and bad for you, right? I just got rid of that completely. And I'm like, I'm just going to eat what I feel right now I need and what is, let's say, good, but for me. And that meant I have changed a few things, which some outsiders might think it wasn't a good. Again, I put it in what is it? Air quotes.
Yeah, speech marks.
Put it in air quotes, yes, because it's not like I have just ditched bad foods, again air quotes. It just means I have changed the balance between, I don't know, whole grains and a little bit of refined grains, which is one of the big things. You should always eat whole grains. And then after a while, I noticed, well, sometimes it's a little bit much for me. I actually need something that's a little bit more refined. And that's just my personal preference for whatever reason. And I felt, a lot better. I feel a lot better. I feel better in myself. My body feels more comfortable. And I also have so one of the things would be that you notice your patterns of emotional eating. And now, maybe before you weren't that sensitive to how the food affects you because you were emotionally eating, right? So your emotions were actually driving the food that you're eating. Whereas now, once you're going through the spiritual awakening, healing, and rebalancing, you notice that actually, because eventually you will be rebalanced emotionally at some point, to a certain extent, and then the food that you eat, you might actually notice how negatively it affects your emotions. Because you're becoming more self-aware, and apart from just feeling the sensations in your body of how certain foods affect you, you can also notice how it affects your emotions and your mental state as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I've been experiencing that as well. So another symptom of the spiritual awakening, coming back now to or staying with emotions, talking about emotional eating, but coming back to emotions and senses and how you're feeling. Other things that you might notice, which is I would think this is quite nice. I think this is good. You might hear different things. You might see different things. You might have enhanced senses. So you might have an enhanced sense of smell, an enhanced sense of taste. So your food actually might physically taste different to how it tasted before. Touch is enhanced, especially for me. So not only my emotions, what I feel, but what I physically feel. I'm drawn to softer fabrics at the moment. I'm drawn to things that feel nice around me. I like soft furnishings and I want to be comfy. I really want to be comfortable all the time. So I'm always on the lookout for what I can get that feels comfortable. And in terms of seeing as well, so you might notice that you see colors around people or plants or animals, because they also have what's known as the aura, I've started noticing I can see colours around people. I've had this quite a lot, particularly this week. I never used to be able to see anything. I never used to be able to visualize very well when I close my eyes and try to visualize things. Now that's really, really heightened. I've been working on that, mind you, but that has also happened as part of the awakening. And hearing, you might hear ringing in one or both of your ears. You might hear what sounds like a change in frequency, like if someone's tuned into a different radio. These are all things that you might experience which are a bit strange at the time. Your dreams might be more vivid. You might remember them more. They might have more emotional drive. So all of you have this amplification of your senses to the physical world around you as part of the awakening.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing came to my mind when you were talking about it is that spiritual awakening doesn't mean that we now become more of spirit and we forget about our physical bodies. Because I think that's the other thing that some might have an idea, they think of someone spiritually awakened and they think of a monk on the top of a mountain, who's completely detached from the material world. It's actually the total opposite. You become more embodied in your body. That is a part of it. Obviously, it can vary depending on where your attention goes, but it's to say that you shouldn't forget about your physical body and your needs of a physical body, the senses, because it's all part of creation, right? If anything, like you say, it just becomes more sensitized, and we're making different choices. We feel differently in our body. Just like with the example of food, we might choose different foods, but we also might respond to our body's needs in a different way. Whereas before, if you were having some aches or pains, you might have maybe sat through them and just like, uncomfortable. Whereas now you can't do it anymore. It's too much. You trust your body. It means you gotta maybe get up and move or do something. And you respect your body a lot more. You're no longer in fight maybe with your body. That includes your shape and whatever, all the things that are very, again, on trend still and have been for a long time based on our looks and stuff. So we just start appreciating for what it is and what it does for us and how it supports us and helps us live through this human life on earth, because this is a part of nature, of earth, right? Our physical bodies and auras. Definitely, I've noticed, especially, I don't know what it is about my bathroom. Maybe it's because there's a lot of white around, but I constantly see colors or auras of my items. So like the soap, and I just see pink around it, or somewhere like at the bottom of my door, I would see a little bit of violet or purple just coming out. I'm like, and so yeah, I see that pretty much daily. And also I have noticed, but I'm pretty sure it's at least a couple of years now. One day I was lying in a park. I had my eyes closed, and it was a very sunny day, and the sun was literally just on me, on my face. Quite, I think it was noon, and I opened my eyes for a second, and I saw these light sparkles. And my first thought was that it looked like dust, when you see dust kind of flying somewhere around you. But then I realized that it wasn't, because the dust is still kind of within the physical realm, in a sense that it is, the gravity works on it. So if you see it flying, it's going to kind of come down, and it doesn't shine, it doesn't sparkle usually, I don't think. But I saw these little, like, sparkling lights moving, up, down, up, left, and they were very, it's sort of like, I can't explain it, but it's like moving particles of light that were just shiny. And that was the first time that I saw it. But since then, it just happens spontaneously now and then again, especially if there's a lot of sunlight at first, at least. Recently, I've noticed that it doesn't have to be a lot of sunlight for me to see it, and I just see little like light blips, tiny little, just like a little dust particle. But again, it's not dust that just goes and falls. It's just like a little frequency, just quickly moves around, and I still don't know what it is, but it's pretty cool. So I see golden. It looks like a golden bright light sparkles that just spontaneously pop up here and there for me.
Yeah, I've seen something very similar. I would describe them as orbs because that's what they look like. They were dancing.
Yes, but they're very tiny.
Yeah, yeah. These were, I mean, yeah, they were kind of, you can't really see it, but that kind of size, like
I would see them even smaller.
Oh, right. See, mine were a little fraction bigger, and there was probably a dozen of them in one like clump, if you like, in one space in my bathroom, and they were dancing, they were moving, and they were like lights, golden lights, and I had no outside window, no light, no nothing. It was in the downstairs toilet of the last house I was in, and I thought, well, that's weird. There's no light on, there's no sunlight, there's nothing. I'm in a room with no external windows. What's that? And I kind of blinked and rubbed my eyes, and they were still there, and I put my hand through them, and my hand went straight through them. And I've seen them since in this house, and they were white the second time I saw them. They were gold the first time, and they were white the second time, and they just danced around in front of me and then just disappeared. And the first time I saw them, I asked my spirit guides who it was, and this was about 4 years ago now, and I drew a card out of my oracle deck, and it said guardian angel, and it had an image of a girl crying with her head in her hands like that, and a guardian angel that she couldn't see was like putting her hand on her shoulder to reassure her. And I was crying, I was having a really bad day, and that's when I saw them. So it was like they'd come to comfort me, and the gold showing me it was an angelic being. Whereas when I saw the white lights here, I felt that was a spirit guide, and that was their energy I was just tuning into. Just momentarily, you just shift frequency and you see something, and then it disappears and you're sort of back where you were. So yes, so colors, lights, dancing orbs, dust particles that flash.
It's kind of like, would you put that decoration on a Christmas tree, the fluffy like
tinsel.
Tinsel, yeah. It's like a gold tinsel that you just take off and you cut into tiny little pieces, tiny, and then you just like sprinkle it out. It's like that. They're very tiny, like but like I say, they don't. It's not like you sprinkle and so it falls down. It just flies around.
Yeah.
Tiny little cut.
Yeah.
Sprinkles, of this golden thistle. Yeah.
So another symptom, funnily enough, we were talking about this earlier, is electrical malfunctions. I've got a friend who breaks everything that is electrical around her. She doesn't mean to, but stuff just won't work. And she said, I've always had this. Everything breaks when I'm around. Light bulbs might go, or you might notice that they flicker a little bit. Sometimes it might be your spirit guides trying to get your attention. You might get frustrated with your computer not working as well, or even doing really weird things, just strange things. Not that it's just a bit slow or that something's crashed, but when your computer just does weird things and you can't describe it, it can affect your internet connection, and the changes in your electromagnetic field, as I understand it, can interfere with the electrical equipment around you, particularly when your vibration fluctuates. So you may notice things malfunction, which is quite frustrating.
Yes, that's a pretty good one. I have noticed that a few times that I had experience when I would talk to someone on my phone, like on the messenger, about something highly spiritual or spirit, and I would get really excited. And I just feel, I just feel the whole energy of this conversation, and my phone would get really hot. and then the messenger, would start being like slower, and I can't type stuff in, and I have to put it away to get this energy a little dissipated, because I can't continue using the technology because it's like malfunctioning. So I had that a lot of times, especially when I'm really inspired, about something, and I talk with such spiritual inspiration. But most recently, it was really actually strange, but also pretty cool. I think I was at work, and I was on I was doing work that required me to talk to people through chat. And I was listening whilst I was waiting for messages. I was listening to this podcast, which, by the way, it's with Melissa White. I have actually done an interview with her, and I have mentioned this part to her at the beginning, if anyone wants to listen, where I often, when I listened to her podcast, depending on what she's covering, I would very strongly feel spirit around me. It's just something about, but it has to be specific, it's not every episode, of course, it's just what she talks about. And usually when it's very deeply talking about spirit and how we experience, and it feels, and I just feel spirit around me, right? So the other day, so I was listening, and I again went into this state. I think maybe I went into a trance or something. I mean, I was conscious, I was working still, but it was just so, the best word to describe it, I would say dreamy. I was just so engrossed in what she was saying, and I could really feel it, and it felt very, I was just right there with her. And I was receiving no messages on that chat. And in my mind, I'm like, this is not right, because there should be queries coming through. And so, obviously things malfunction sometimes. So I would check, is my internet working? Are all of the other apps and systems working? Everything was working fine. Nothing was stalling. I wrote a message to someone. It went through okay. And I was like, I don't know what's happening. But it pretty much took good 20 minutes, if not 30 minutes, of the duration of that talk that she was doing. And I just felt so high up there somewhere. And then when I finished, and I'm like, this is not right. There should be messages. And at some point it started pinging, and there was a backlog, like people were writing like all this time, and it was not coming through to me. I did not see anything. There was nothing happening. Everyone else could see it, and then only at that point when I went into a bit of a panic, I was like, oh my god, people are asking questions, and I'm like, there was nothing there. And so I started, talking to other people from my team through the same system, and it was going back to me, and I was talking with them. It was working basically, but just that one thing just didn't do anything for me. And I was like, that is like so weird.
Yeah, it's really weird.
And it must have been something to do with that, because otherwise it doesn't make sense, because it wasn't the whole system that wasn't working. It was just that particular chat for some reason. Yeah. People had to cover for me in the end, because they, obviously they thought that there's something, like, why am I not there? And I'm like, and all this time I kept refreshing, I kept clicking, making sure that, everything's working fine, and I can see that, the system works. So that was a very, very strange experience, but I have no other explanation for it. Because it was just that one chat. Afterwards, everything suddenly was like, oh, back to normal, like back in this dimension or whatever, I don't know. But those were especially like the mobile phones, and this in particular, which actually kind of affected my work, which I did not expect. That was really pretty funny. Yeah.
So that's electrical malfunctions, just so that you're aware. If things start to malfunction with no reason, no rhyme or reason, then it could be that you're in that sort of space. This for me was the catalyst of the awakening, but also throughout the awakening, you might notice you will notice life-changing events, big things happening, because as you're awakening, you are dropping away things that no longer are a vibrational match. That's not to say those things were bad. Like we've said earlier, it might be that you develop an intolerance. You might develop, something that you never thought you'd have. You might lose a job. It could be quite sudden. It could be quite catastrophic. It could be that you're made redundant. It could be that you lose friendships. It could be that you divorce. Big things can often be the catalyst of the awakening, because it calls us to question our purpose in life. But also throughout the awakening, you might notice that the breaking down and the loss of things that are not matching your new vibration, and that's part of it as well. So things might drop away that aren't serving your highest good anymore, which again can be uncomfortable at times. It can be sad, but it's all again for a reason, where the trajectory of where you're going has changed. The energy around you has changed, and so you can't continue on your awakening journey with things being exactly as they used to be, because then nothing will change. So you might notice some fairly big things all coming in at once, and you think, why is all this happening? I've been trundling along and life's been good and everything's been fine, and all of a sudden my world's been turned upside down. But it's because it has to be turned upside down, because you're going in a completely new direction.
And that might be the time when your spiritual awakening consciously starts, when you become aware of it, because you're starting to go through a crisis of some sort. That's how I kind of feel it started for me. Not because, I was already aware, I was already spiritually developing or whatever, and now I'm like, kind of expecting things to happen. It just happened because it was time. And it triggered, obviously, my awareness expanding and understanding what's happening. But at first I didn't know, but it had to happen for me to release a lot of stuff that I was carrying up until then.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to that trust. I think we mentioned earlier about just trusting that it's for a higher purpose. And if suddenly the career you've done your entire life falls away, and you think, well, I trained for that, I've qualified in that, I worked hard at that, I enjoyed that, maybe it's not meant to be following you into your future. And you'll look back on these big life-changing events when you've got the clarity around what's coming in, and see why all of those things needed to happen. And these things need to crumble and break down. And it's the same around us in the world, systems, viewpoints, the way we are as a society, the things that we've built that have sustained us for a very long time, and things that have perhaps worked very, very well for a very long time, but they're not going to support us moving into this new world, this new earth, where the vibration is different, where the energy is different. The things that are of a lower vibration, if you like, not that, like I say, I'm not saying that they're bad, but the things that cannot sustain us in the new earth will have to break down and fall away. So it's reflected in your external world as well as your internal world, and as well as what's happening to you will start to happen to other people.
And with jobs, that's a good example, for instance, because if anyone is worried at that point, all this work, I've put so much energy, maybe probably money, if there's any higher education involved and stuff, and if you're worried that it will go to waste, it won't, because that's the other thing I have noticed, that it's actually, I can see the reason why people maybe were in different jobs before to what they're doing now, although they are in a spiritual space, but they have so much background knowledge and experience of something, whatever industry they were working in, that they can now use within their spiritual work. And if anything, it just makes it richer. It enhances what they're doing. It might specialize them in a particular area. and make them experts, even better experts, because they have this expanded view on things now, and can help others approach, different topics with a completely different, or expanded, not different, perspective. So, for instance, I would hear about financial advisors. Now they're, empowering people and adding it onto it, the psychology and the spirituality of money. And now they're helping, for instance, people manage their money with that, spiritual awareness and tools. And also then you have like lawyers that might be now fighting or helping others deal with difficult legal matters, also with that spiritual view on things, and things like that. So it's always, it never goes to waste. um Personally, I feel, even if you haven't been maybe working in a particular specialization, like you don't have to be, a lawyer, a doctor, or whatever, but maybe you were doing a so-called, let's call basic admin job, like I was. It also served a purpose. Perhaps it served a purpose for you to become grounded, to become maybe a little bit structured, organized, consistent in some way, and also might have served your feeling of security and safety at the time. It's like it might have been an anchor to which you always knew you can come back to to kind of to ground yourself, really. I've heard, I think you did as well, because you did take Saljade's courses. She talks about her working in, was it kindergarten, I think, or school. She was working with kids, and she always said how that always brought her back and helped her ground herself whilst she was developing her spiritual business.
Mm.
So, it's never wasted. It always serves some sort of a purpose, whether you take the knowledge or skills with you. I mean, you definitely will to some extent, no matter what is the work that you're doing. And if you are in a very specialized field, there's a big chance that you will just, the spirituality will then enhance it even more, and you'll be able to merge those two worlds together.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I was going to say, and you've just said what was on my mind, nothing is ever wasted, but it does have to change and evolve.
Mm.
But it might have served a purpose at the time, or it might still serve a purpose, but a different purpose. So it's always worth bearing that in mind. And it might not always be obvious initially, but it's one of those things you need to kind of get a few years down the line to look back and say, okay, now I see why I needed to learn this, this, and this, and this, and this. And very often we learn life skills as well, don't we, through our career. So if it changes, you will have learned something that will translate and transfer over into the future and be of benefit somehow. And then the last one on the list, and we talked earlier about being more sensitive to energy. So you might not feel comfortable anymore in crowds. You might not feel comfortable anymore with loud noises and stuff like this. But you may notice that in general, you have less interest in extroverted activities. And maybe you were quite the extrovert. Maybe you were always life and soul of the party, and you like to go out and you like to do lots of things. When you go through the awakening, you will feel more drawn to introverted activity. That doesn't mean you won't do anything that's of a more extrovert nature, but you may find that where you used to enjoy certain things, you have, again, it's that you've got less tolerance for it because it exhausts you, and you crave solitude, you crave your time in nature, but you also crave being by yourself. Whereas before, maybe you didn't like being on your own. Maybe you were like, no, I want to be with other people. And then suddenly you find yourself saying, I need to schedule in some alone time into my diary, into my week, to just be me on my own. And you feel more comfortable on your own when you go through the
Yeah.
awakening. You don't feel lonely. You actually kind of thrive on having that time built into your week.
Yeah, because being around other people also oftentimes is a good distraction. So we don't like to be by ourselves, because that's when all the gunk comes out. We don't like to be left with our own thoughts. We would, even if we're by ourselves, we might probably watch a show, a TV, something to just keep our mind occupied, because being alone with our thoughts and our feelings becomes very, very uncomfortable. Whereas when you start going through spiritual awakening, you actually notice the value in that,
Mm.
and you no longer want the distraction, because your soul, your body is driving you towards evolving and growing and releasing and healing, and it needs the solitude for that.
Mm.
um, and as we mentioned before, you might seek some help, of course, from someone else, depending on how big, or overwhelming or not it is for you. But that's sporadic, it's not constant, and then you'll still need that time by yourself, to just go through things by yourself, really, and become comfortable with yourself, becoming comfortable with who you are, what you have to offer. That all comes with that spiritual growth and awakening, when you eventually, notice that, oh, I am of value. My uniqueness is actually of value, and you no longer need that sort of validation, maybe from that group of friends that maybe you needed before, um, because maybe you had, a lot of friends for the purpose of, I don't know, feeling valued as part of that group, or feeling valuable by being that part of the group, or whatever they stand for, being seen by them in some way, and or, like I say, distraction from your own, little demons, let's call them, or goblins. I like to call them little goblins. They sound a bit less scary. Yeah, and definitely doesn't mean that you're becoming antisocial. Quite the opposite. You probably become a lot more open and loving towards others. It might end up in you changing your friend circle if there is no more resonance, but
Mhm.
it might also serve as the enhancement of that friend circle, because suddenly you're, you know, people might say, "Oh, you've changed," but you're actually the same person. You're just actually yourself now, and you're shining a bit of light, you know, within that group of friends.
Yeah, definitely. There are so many. I mean that is some of the symptoms that you will experience. There are others as well, but these are some of the symptoms, the effects of the awakening that you might experience, and you may not put them down to the awakening. But the more I research the spiritual awakening, the more I experience it, and the more I talk to other people going through it, there's a lot of very common themes. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
good to be aware of them. And if you're listening thinking, oh, I can tick several of those off the list, then it might be that you are experiencing your own shift and change within your own spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. So hopefully that has helped people. It can feel quite isolating and lonely initially, certainly when you're in the early stages of the awakening. But nothing could be further from the truth. There are so many people presently going through this, which is why people like myself and Kat are being drawn to talk about it, so that people don't feel alone and recognize what it is. It's all positive. We are changing individually, collectively. The planet is changing energetically. It's an exciting time, and it's an exciting thing to go through. It's turbulent, and there are ups and downs with it. But the more we share our stories, and we realize it's all part and parcel of it. It's all perfectly normal.
Yeah, and remember that you're never alone, even if it's just a spirit that's around you, uh, angels or loved ones in spirit. But if you don't have any, if you feel kind of isolated in your immediate environment, then go online. Right? We've got online communities. I have my own group, also on Facebook. So that's definitely one thing that happened to me, or for me, more like, when I started going through my spiritual awakening. I just happened to come across the right people at the right time. I found the right groups. I found the right circles. Even, I mean, Mel, you were definitely within my very first circle ever,
Yeah.
and look, we're still in contact. So, and also I met other people along the way, and the thing is that you might feel like you're so isolated, but actually you notice that all of these beautiful, open, loving people suddenly come into your life, but they might come through the internet, you know? It's just, even just putting that question or intention out there, I would love to come across or meet someone online that could help me, and spirit will bring it to you, you know? So just follow your inspiration, whatever group, community, you know, you're drawn to, just do it, you know? Yeah, go for it. Okay.
Wonderful. Okay. So that's a wrap for today. So if you do have any questions when you're watching this back, pop them in the comments. We might not be live when you add your comment, but we will get notified. So pop them in the comments and let us know if you've got anything you want to share about your own awakening, any questions at all. And then we will respond to you, either if it's just a comment that we can respond to in the comments, we will, or if it's something that we feel that is an in-depth subject that we want to raise, then we'll talk about it in one of our future podcasts.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome.
All right, then. Till next time.
We'll see you all next week.